Welcome to another episode. What are you reading? What are you writing? A weekly video podcast features creatives, writers, and readers, and we come together to talk about books. I am your host, Karen E. Osborne, author of 4 novels and counting. I am so glad you're here. I think you're going to enjoy our next guest. Hello, everybody. I can't wait to introduce you to my guest today, who I am really excited about. He's just had an incredible life that you're going to want to hear about. His name is Cappy McGarr. Hey, Cappy.
Hey, Karen, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm so delighted that you were able to arrange this and that we were able to do this. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, this much, and then he's going to tell you about himself. So he is celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Mark Twain Prize for Humor. And the way that he's celebrating it is with a paperback version of a book that he wrote that came out earlier, The Man Who Made Mark Twain Famous. Now, isn't that a funny title? It's a really funny title. And McGarr reveals for the first time in this book how the Mark Twain Prize National Award for Humor was conceived. And listen to this. He shares behind the scenes anecdotes on myriad celebrities who he has dealt with over the decades, including people like Eddie Murphy, Bill Murray, Paul McCartney, and Ken Burns, the famous and amazing Ken Burns, wrote the foreword with numerous celebrities offering their kudos, such as Lily Tomlin and Carole King. That is just so like, they want to hear the whole story now. Everybody's excited. So humor, like music, is such a universal appeal. You
Right.
know, everybody has a sense of connectedness through humor and through music. So tell us how you kind of got interested in humor in the first place.
Karen, thank you. That's a really good question because I think it's the most important question. Humor is the most important thing we have as a human. When we are down and we're blue, uh, everybody needs a laugh. We've got so much consternation in this world, so much controversy, so much conflict. And that's the reason, one of the reasons, quite frankly, we started the Mark Twain Prize for Humor at the Kennedy Center, so we can pause once a year and thank people who make us laugh and bring joy to our lives. Uh, you know, life is not easy. Everybody has ups and downs in their life, but if you're a family around the table and you can tell a joke or come up with something funny or a trip that's gone bad that you look back on and you laugh about because it was just so horrible. Humor is very, very important. And so I think it's one of the most important things in human life, to get a laugh and to take your mind off of your problems and situations that might be in a situation you're in that you might not want to be in. So I love humor. The way I got started is my dad was a roughneck in the oil business, and we moved from city to city to city. And the way to make friends, I found an easy way for me to make friends is try to make people laugh. And so I've been a frustrated stand-up comedian my whole life. I went a different route. Got 3 degrees at the University of Texas, my alma mater, and I got my MBA. And I went to work for Goldman Sachs for about 4 or 5 years, and then started a hedge fund for a while. And then President Clinton was nice enough to appoint me to the board of the Kennedy Center, and then President Obama reappointed me. But when my Clinton appointment was effective, that's when we started the Mark Twain Prize for Humor at the Kennedy Center. So I
Wow.
was a frustrated stand-up comedian, but now I get to honor all the spectacular stand-up comedians of our lifetime. So
And what an honor for you that two presidents of the United States appointed you. That's a wow. That's a wow just by itself. I agree about humor. I find that laughing at myself is also a great way to make things go better. I make sure I laugh at myself at least once a day. Like, did you
But
really
Karen,
do that?
you're right. Self-effacing humor is critically important. If you're a really good politician and you're a really good CEO of a corporation, and you have to give speeches all the time, the best way to begin a speech is self-effacing humor. Make fun of yourself, bring your crowd in to your situation, and making fun of yourself is easy to do. Some people have the knack for it, some people don't, but it's always a really wonderful way to make a new friend or to begin a speech or whatever. So humor, I think, is critically important. I agree.
Yes, 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 yes. So, I think I know the answer to this, but I could be like totally wrong, so I want to hear it. So, why did you name the prize the Mark Twain Prize? Why of all the great people who are funny, and why did you pick Mark Twain?
Well, Mark Twain was our first stand-up comedian, and it came about it by accident. He took all of his profits from Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer and his other incredible books he wrote, and put most of his money in a printing press that he thought was going to revolutionize printing, book printing, uh,
Mm.
newspaper printing, and it was a total failure. He declared bankruptcy, and to eat and have food on his table to eat food, he is and provide for his family. He went to these theaters throughout the United States and just talked about Washington, talked about people, talked about everyday life, and basically told fun and funny stories. He was an incredible wit, incredible humorist, and a credible satirist. And since he was kind of the first satirist that we had, it was a natural to say Mark Twain Prize. I'll never forget, we honored Richard Pryor was our first Mark Twain Prize winner.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and this will give you a little bit of background of how we started the Mark Twain Prize. So we had Harry Belafonte, we had Whoopi Goldberg, we had Gene Wilder, it was a spectacular group of people. And everyone that got up there said, well, Mark Twain would have been so happy with having the first prize in his name given to Richard Pryor. People don't know this, but Richard Pryor was a co-writer of one of my very favorite movies of all time, Blazing Saddles, which was written by Mel Brooks. And Mel Brooks asked
Mhm.
Richard to co-write it with him. And by the way, I had dinner with Mel and asked him this question. I said, could you make that movie again now? He said, no, there's too many N words and there's too many, it was probably, I couldn't make it. And he said, Richard was insistent on adding more N words than anyone else. And I said, no, Richard, we have enough already, please. And he
Yes,
also
yes.
wanted Richard Pryor to be Black Bart. And he could not get Richard insured because of the drug issue. And so that's when he
Mm.
picked Cleavon Little, who I think did a spectacular job. But you think about so anyway, when we're interviewing Richard Pryor, Chris Rock had just come off Saturday Night Live, and Chris Rock was a one of the greatest spectacular comedians then and also
And
now.
now,
And
and
now, by
now
the
he's
way,
he's a funny guy.
he's a funny guy and phenomenal. But he said he got up on stage, and I had invited the entire board of the Kennedy Center and the orchestra, and I was right behind him. And Jean Kennedy Smith is the president's, John Kennedy's sister, was ambassador to Ireland at the time. And so we had the executive committee the next morning, and then we had our board meeting after that. And so Chris Rock gets up there and he said, I've heard all this MFBS all night long about how Mark Twain would have been so happy about, honoring Richard Pryor. He said, that's the biggest bunch of BS I've heard in my MFBS life. He just said, take my MF bag upstairs right now. Well, it was in the concert hall at the Kennedy Center, and laughter, longest sustained laughter I'd ever heard. I mean, it was hilarious, only as Chris Rock can do it. And so I felt pretty good about it. By the way, Richard Pryor was so controversial at the time, I had to buy a third of the seats of the concert hall to make sure the hall was filled. I mean, it was just, I never knew why. I think it was probably because of the drug situation, but Richard Pryor is one of the most important comedians of the last 70 years. I mean, he truly has got his Richard Pryor has influenced so many people that followed him. He truly is one of the most iconic people ever. And I'm so happy and proud that we honored him the first Mark Twain Prize. But anyway, the next morning at the executive committee, the chairman said, Cappy, give us an update on the Mark Twain Prize. I said, well, you know, we lost $100,000, but we brought new people in, and we really think this could be a really great thing for the Kennedy Center. And two people spoke against it. One was Buffy Cafritz, who became a very close personal friend, and the other one was Alma Powell, Colin Powell's wife. And they said, you know, we don't need another fundraiser at the Kennedy Center. And I tap danced. I was sucking up until my cheeks met. And so they had a vote, and there was one negative vote. Alma Powell and Buffy Cafritz voted for it, but Gene Kennedy Smith voted against it. And so after the executive committee was over, the chairman said, Cappy, I'm so sorry. Twain's dead. I said, we only got one negative vote. He goes, Cappy, it's the sister of the president of the United States this place is named after. I went, oh, I guess you're right. So I made a beeline to Ambassador Smith, and I said, Madam Ambassador, I said, you voted against it. I said, the Twain's dead if you don't change your mind. And she said, well, my brother would have been horrified with the language and the N word and the F word said on the stage bearing his name. I said, well, Madam Ambassador, I totally agree that it was inappropriate. By the way, the Kennedy Center does not censor anyone because we just don't do that. But I said, you know, give us a chance. We'll honor so-and-so and so-and-so. I, started naming, Carl Reiner, Jonathan Winters, and other people that she might like. And she said, well, let me think about it. And long story short, she changed her vote. And so that first year we lost $100,000. Now it's one of the biggest fundraisers at the Kennedy Center in the 25 year. We've celebrated 25 years, honored Chris Hart, excuse me, take that out, please, Karen. We honored Kevin Hart, and it was on Netflix. We have so far we've got 34 million views on Netflix. So
wow, I watched it. Kevin Hart's a funny guy.
He's a funny guy.
Yeah, and who says he's not short? He's always lying about his height. So, this is I'm always interested in why somebody wants to take all that story and put it into a book. Because that's not an easy thing to do. So many people start writing and they never finish because it's such a daunting experience. So why did you decide, you know what, I need to write this down?
Karen, that's a question that I've asked myself many times. I said, when I am through with Medicare and gone through the great Mark Twain thing in the sky, I want people to know and realize the history of the Mark Twain Prize and some of these incredible people that we've honored. And we've honored everybody from, Tina Fey to Steve Martin, to Billy Crystal, to Dave Chappelle. I mean, it's important we write down who has been honored and write stories about them. I was privileged to MC all the cast dinners where all the talent was there. And we honored Carol Burnett, not to get off the subject, but just to tell you a little bit of the Carol Burnett dinner. My dinner partner was Tina Fey. And so I get up there and I said, Carol, congratulations, we've given you the Kennedy Center honors, and we're now happy to give you the Mark Twain Prize for American Humor. And I said, Carol got her start, like many young aspiring actresses, on a mattress. Huge laugh. She knew what my joke was. And then after the laughter died, because she's a pro's pro, she said, only once. And another huge laugh. Carol, thank you. She did not step on my punchline. I said, yes, Carol got her first Tony nomination, Once Upon a Mattress on Broadway. And I get back to my seat, and Tina Fey goes, hey, Cappy, mattress joke, solid, does a karate chop. And my wife says, please don't encourage him. His ego his head will explode. But anyway, but over the years, I was able to MC a lot of those dinners, and it's been just a wonderful, wonderful thing. But I wanted to write it down in a book, so I did it kind of a memoir, quasi memoir, where I write down not only about the Mark Twain Prize and how it got started, and Karen, I did get an interview, which I shouldn't tell you, but I will tell you. I'm not going to mention anybody's names. It was a very prominent publication, and it was evidently a younger woman who was interviewing me. And she said, "Now, Cappy, the name of your book is The Man Who Made Mark Twain Famous." I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, how did you make him famous?" And I wanted a good interview, so I didn't say, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "Well, it's satire. It's my tongue in my cheek. Mark Twain made himself famous. No one made him famous except Mark Twain. He's one of the most famous authors in American history." Anyway, but
Was she embarrassed? She appropriately embarrassed?
No, I was so sucky uppy.
He was so
Karen,
nice.
I sucked up until my cheeks meet. I tell you, I was no. I would never put anybody on the spot, but I hung up the phone. I went, oh my God, I hope that interview went well. But no, I talked about meeting my wife. I talked about the Mark Twain Prize. I talked about starting the National Award for Popular Song, the Gershwin Prize. And I talked about some of the people that I think are most incredible people I've ever met in my life, which is the former commander of SEAL Team 6. He's got a whole chapter, which embarrassed him to no end, by the way, because they are very humble, very down-to-earth people. But he's got to be a very close friend of mine. But, telling the story about taking, for example, Eddie Murphy into the Oval Office to meet Obama. Eddie and Obama are the same age, and we walk in, and the president says, "Eddie, you and I are the same age, but you have no gray hair. I've got a lot of gray hair." And Eddie said, "Well, Mr. President, you got a very stressful job. All I do is try to make people laugh." And the president looked at me and said, "Cappy, I'm funny, aren't I?" I went, "Yes, Mr. President, you are very funny." And he said, "My timing's good too." I went, "Perfect timing." Anyway, we had a little laugh. And then he took us to the Situation Room, which was just incredible. And the president walks in. Obviously, everybody stands up, but everybody really wanted the picture made with Eddie Murphy. And so it was really a wonderful thing. That afternoon, the president allowed us to take a tour of the White House. It was closed, and so I took Eddie and his family on a tour of the White House. And it was right before the Hillary Clinton-Trump election in 2016. And this was October. The election was in November. And so he's looking at a portrait of Ronald Reagan. And I earned my way through school by doing voices, impressions. I had a radio program, did a little bit of stand-up. So I'm behind him, and he's looking up at the Ronald Reagan portrait. And I go, "Well, Eddie, welcome to the White House. Mommy and I are glad to have you here. Just don't rearrange the furniture." He turned around, he said, "That's a great Reagan." He said, "Do you anymore?" I said, "Well, Carter, I did President Carter." He goes, "Well, Carter was my very first impression." So he does a great Carter, a lot better than mine. He said, "Let me hear your Carter." I will. "Well, the White House is a great example for Habitat for Humanity." And he said, "Boy, wow, that's great. You anymore?" I said, "Well, I did Clinton." He said, well, let me hear Clinton." I went, "I sure hope Hillary wins. I'll be interviewing interns 2 at a time, if you know what I mean." Anyway, he gave me a big hug, and the next night I'm emceeing the cast dinner, and Dave Chappelle's there, and a bunch of people. And so after the tributes and the roast, I said, "Eddie, come on up. We've got a gift for you." We always give our Mark Twain Prize recipients a first edition Twain book. So Eddie gets up on stage, and I got this great picture in the book of him giving me a big hug. He said, "Cappy's really funny. He does great impressions. Cappy, I'm going to go back down to my table. Call me back up as Ronald Reagan." I said, and Karen, I practice, a script. I've got people that help me. I have writers. I've got, I need to be funny. I'm standing in front of the funniest people in the world. And so I said, "Eddie, I don't think that's a good idea." He goes, No. He just jumps off the stage, goes back to his table. And I go, Trevor Noah, the former Daily Show host, was my wife's dinner partner that night, by the way. And I'll tell you about that a little bit after this.
Well, no, we don't have time for that story, but finish this one.
Okay.
Or finish this one.
So I said, "Eddie, come on up on stage." I said, "Well, Eddie, when Mommy and I were in the White House, we traded places just like you did in that movie. Come on up. We got a little gift for you." And just very quickly, Karen, Trevor Noah came up to me and he said, Cappy, was that ad lib? Reagan? I said, yeah. And he said, boy, you got a gigantic set of balls. And I went, Trevor, they're not as big as you think they are. Anyway, Karen, I could go on with stories, but that's the Eddie Murphy story.
Great. So you're having me hysterical already. So tell us what you're working on now.
I have a children's book I have just written. And by the way, it took me 3 years to write the Twain book. I dictated every story, and then I had it transcribed, and then I had an incredible editor. And I had one of the guys that helps me on my speeches in front of all those famous, funny people to funny it up. And so I called him. He wrote for Stephen Colbert, Samantha Bee, and another one. But he was really funny guy. He was 24 when I met him. He's now 29, so he's really, really old. And so I called him and I said, "Hey, listen, I've written this children's book, and it's my grandkids are Annette Cap and Hudson, and it's the adventures of Princess Little Cap and Sir Hud the Brave. Live in a castle with her evil sheep, Lamantha, and she hates them and she blows them out of the kingdom. And Sir Hud the Brave says, Lamantha, how can you do that? She's the queen's daughter. And Lamantha says, well, there's mutton you can do about it. And so there's puns all the way through. By the way, the very first chapter title is The Coup de Ba, B-A-A. So my illustrator said, Cappy, the old cheerleader yell, rah, 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 sis, boom, ba, it was in the late 1800s. I said, sure. He said, well, Johnny Carson made it very famous by Karnak. He goes, sis, boom, ba. And Ed McMahon goes, sis, boom, ba. He tears it open. He goes, the sound of an exploding sheep. And so he said, this is a perfect story because sis, brothers and sisters, are Little Cap and Sir Hud the Brave. And Lamantha, it blows them out of the cannon. So sis, boom, ba. So the second chapter is pumpkin iron, where it's kind of like the sword and the stone, where they taking the sword out of a pumpkin, it turns into a gigantic dinosaur. The third chapter is trial and terror, where they meet werewolves and piranhas and all that stuff. The final chapter, when they take back the castle from Lamantha, is good wool hunting. So it's got puns all the way through it. It's beautifully illustrated. It comes out December 3rd. And I told Chandler, I said, Chandler Dean is his name. I said, Chandler, I'm putting your name on the front of the book. He said, you've already written it. You've got the whole story done. I said, I want it to rhyme. He said, well, I don't know how to rhyme. I said, go buy a rhyming dictionary and I'll put your name on the front of the book. It took me 3 months to write the children's book. It took him 4.5 months to rhyme it, but he did a spectacular job, kind of. My youngest daughter, who's a PhD from Princeton, teaches journalism and communication at University of Wisconsin, took it, rechanged the cadence, put in like gooseberry tarts, and we really created it. Changed it and made it so much better. And Chandler and I, in our acknowledgement, said we want to thank Catherine McGarr because she's a gooder writer than we are. So it's all fun and funny and a lot of puns.
It's coming out in December. That is wonderful, wonderful. So you and I talked briefly before we started this, and that the best place for everybody to find you is in the bookstores, right? To go onto Amazon,
bookstores,
go into Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, Barnes and Noble, Amazon. Simon & Schuster distributes my book. Post Hill Press is my publisher, and they have a arrangement with Simon & Schuster, so I'm very appreciative of that. And so, but Amazon and other bookstores are the way to find my book.
Excellent, excellent. I want to thank you so much for coming on to my show. You've made me laugh so hard, which is such a good thing. One has to laugh every day if they can, right? And I know you have our audience laughing as well. Thank you guys for being with us. And I hope to see you next week on What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Have a great week. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Karen. Really appreciate it. A big fan of yours.